Yes, so I think we can start. People can still come in if they want. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the afternoon session of our workshop. My name is Tijs Vandemeulebroucke. I'm one of the senior researchers here, and I will be your guide through this afternoon session. I'm looking very much forward to it. I hope you are too. So it's the same like the morning session, 45 minutes of talk, 15 minutes of Q&A. We'll try to make it as strict as possible. I've been told to express again that people should not touch the screen. It's very sensitive, it seems. So please don't do that. Were there other things? No, not that I remember or know of. So we can start directly with our first speaker of today. That is Husein Inusah. He's associate professor of philosophy at the Department of Classics and Philosophy of the University of Cape Coast in Ghana. He obtained his PhD title in 2014 at the same university, with which he also won the Vice Chancellor's Award for the most outstanding dissertation in the humanities category of the University of Ghana. His research focus lies on epistemology and decoloniality, African philosophy, and the concept of rationality in traditional African political traditions and traditional African consensual democracy. Apart from that, he's also editor of the journal, editor-in-chief of the journal Philosophy and Culture, and is or was a fellow at the following institutes: the Stellenbosch Institute of Advanced Study in South Africa, the Wissenschaftskolleg zu Berlin Institute for Advanced Study in Berlin in Germany, and the American Council of Learned Societies of the African Humanities Program in the United States of America. The title of his talk is Indigenous Epistemologies, Decolonizing Artificial Intelligence and Shaping Sustainable Futures, and during which he will argue that the notion of decoloniality in artificial intelligence debates should be understood as the pursuit of justice, encompassing plurality, inclusion, delocalization and diversity, and here so also emphasizing the importance and the necessity of connecting the unconnected in the global south. I hope you have a good time. Husein, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's quite interesting if you have to talk after several other talks, then you wonder if everything you want to say has not been said already. All right, so I'm going to try to say something new. Maybe. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues and honored guests, I am glad to be here. Okay, so this is my university. I'm glad to be here to talk about indigenous knowledge systems and AI in the context of decoloniality and sustainable futures. These are very, very thought-provoking and stimulating discussions, attracting scholarly attention in this era of massive technological advancement. So because my talk focuses on indigenous epistemologies, let me talk briefly about indigenous epistemologies. So indigenous epistemologies refer to the knowledge systems, ways of knowing, and worldviews that are specific to indigenous cultures and communities. They are rooted in the experiences, histories, and relationships of indigenous peoples with their lands, environment, and communities. So indigenous knowledge systems are often transmitted orally through generations, and so they are context-specific and situated within specific cultural, social, environmental context. Indigenous knowledge systems are shaped by local experiences, histories, and relationships. And because indigenous knowledge systems are orally transmitted, they include storytelling, myth, legend, songs, and other forms of narratives that convey knowledge, values, and cultural practices. Over the years, I have been working on Akan proverbs. Akan people are a linguistic group in Ghana that is the largest linguistic group in Ghana. constitute about 47.5% of the Ghanaian population. So of about 44% of the Ghanaian population, those who are not native of Akan language, actually speak one of the Akan languages. So I've been working on their proverbs. And in my research on Akan proverbs, I emphasize the value of place-based knowledge or situated knowledge and relationality, which teaches us about how these knowledge systems connect to the natural environment in which people live. So among the Akan people, for example, proverbs are said to emerge from long-term observation of the behavioral patterns of a non-human entity or a very important human event or circumstance. Hence, Akan proverbs are justified by two strict rules. They are justified if they mimic or they copy the correct behavioral patterns of an entity, or they are justified if they are consistent with the entire cosmic perception of the Akan people, their practices, and their lived experiences. So, for example, the tortoise in Akan, or in most Akan proverbs, is treated as very calm, sympathetic, tranquil, placid, and untroubled. So several proverbs that are attributed to the tortoise pick out these salient behavioral patterns and capabilities of the tortoise within its ecology. So there's this proverb that says, "Achichidie se ensako na ensa aba." The literal meaning is, the tortoise says that one hand goes and the other hand comes. This is an Akan proverb. Now, to understand this proverb, you must be situated. You must actually be familiar with the doings or the behavioral patterns of the tortoise. Now, let's imagine this. Just imagine all the animals that walk on four legs. If one of their front legs or four legs is damaged or physically damaged, they are still able to move. They limp on it and then they move. But that cannot be said for the tortoise. If one of the front legs or four legs of the tortoise is physically damaged, movement is completely curtailed. The reason is that the tortoise is trapped in its shell. And so when one of the front legs is physically damaged or injured, the shell hits the floor, and because it's heavy, the tortoise is unable to move. Now, why is it that this tortoise is being used to create this imagery? Now, to map this metaphor from the domain source to abstraction, you must understand what the entire body represents. So the body of the tortoise here represents an organization, a collective, or a community or a society. And then the individual legs represent the aggregated individual in the collective. So the assumption is that if there is a community or a collective where each and every individual does their responsibilities adequately, then there is progress, no matter how slow the progress might be. And this proverb is used in context where we are admonishing people to do their individual responsibilities in the community. So, among the Akan people, a proverb of this nature, or such proverbs that are attributed to the tortoise, they are attributed to the tortoise, and then they allow the tortoise to speak, like the tortoise is, or the entity is giving speech, and also is giving life. So this proverb is not attributed to anybody, it's attributed to the tortoise itself. So it says, the tortoise says. It is a tortoise that says, not any other person. So it's a way of giving the tortoise even an epistemic agency. And this should tell you the relationship between all the the importance of the environment to knowledge acquisition among indigenous communities. There's also another proverb I want to draw our attention to, is this. Now, Proverbs, I've already explained that Proverbs are also justified among the Akan people. For example, if the proverb is consistent with the entire cosmic perception, or is consistent with their perception about the world. For example, there's this Akan proverb that you see here that has often been used wrongly. The proverb actually is that it says this: if you say "Oben insua," and I would say "Okoto no okoto no bonwa." Literal translation is that if you get close to any water body enough, that is when you realize that, or you will see that the hole of the crab is not that deep. But this proverb has been corrupted to read "Saoben insua na wote say koto bonwa." That is, if you get close enough to the river, that is when you realize that the crab coughs. Actually, the idea that the crab coughs is not consistent with the Akan people lived experiences and circumstances. The reason is that the Akan people live, usually most of the Akan people live in the forest enclaves of Ghana. And in the forest enclaves, crabs that are found in the forest hide in the hole. And actually, it's a nuisance to get them because you have to dig down the hole to get them out. But then if you get close to the river bodies, especially those in the coastal areas, you find out that crabs in the coastal areas around the beaches do not hide in the hole. They just lie down in the surface of the water somehow at the shore. So the idea is that if you get close enough to a river or to any water body, you realize that crabs, the hole of the crabs is not that deep. And when do we use this proverb? We use it in context where we want to admonish people to try what they think is difficult, or what they think is a very difficult task. So we say, okay, don't worry, you're thinking that this is very difficult. If you actually get close to it, you realize that it's as easy as it is. Now, what lesson do we learn from this? One, to understand Akan proverbs, you must be situated or embodied. That is, you must experience the environment, the culture, and then the daily circumstances that confront the Akan people. So to understand the Akan people's ways of doing things, you must also understand the entities that feature in their proverbs. So proverbs, as indigenous epistemology, teach us about the situatedness of knowledge. 2, proverbs also teach us about the fact that knowledge is relational. By relationality, I mean interconnectedness and interdependence. This has been talked about a lot of times in the previous talks. It is a view that nothing exists in isolation because existence necessarily entails being in a relationship. So you will notice that Akan proverbs reflect the Akan people's deep connection and relationship with their natural environment. So the Akans don't only allow non-human entities to feature in their proverbs. Like I said earlier, they also assign them a sense of epistemic agency and attribute knowledge to them. So by attributing knowledge this way to non-human entities, the Akan people highlight the importance of respect for nature and then the interdependence between humans and the natural world. So the Akan people and most other indigenous peoples are themselves, or they regard themselves as part of nature, and then they rely on nature through proverbs to convey cultural values, ethical principles, or ecological knowledge. So there's a significant relationship between epistemology and ontology, which I want to talk about briefly. In mainstream philosophy, for example, we learn from Descartes and some of the scholars preceding him that the relationship between epistemology and ontology is that epistemology is the grounds for establishing context-neutral ontology, usually couched in the phrase, in French it says, cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. However, among the Akan people, it's different. To be is to be situated. and to be situated is to be. So there is no distinction at all between knowledge and context or one's situatedness. This then informs the Akan ontology about a person, a community, and then a natural environment. So the Akan people believe that a person is made up of the okra, which is okra, well, the closest equivalence of okra is the soul. Maybe something else can describe it better. It hasn't come to mind yet. So for now, I still refer to it as a soul. So the Akans call okra, or according to the Akans, a person is made up of the okra, which is the soul, sumsum, which is the spirit, and then nipedua, which is the body, and then muja, which is the person's maternal lineage, and then entron, which is the person's paternal lineage. Now, the okra, which is the sumsum, is the life source or the spark of life. The sumsum is a spirit that defines one's personality. And then the nipedua is the body, the human body. So unlike the Cartesian doctrine, where the I is a combination of two distinct elements, the spirit and body, the Akan construe the mind and the body in quasi-physical terms. The explanation is that when a person dies, their bodies perish, but their okra and sunsum, which is soul and spirit, still live. But the soul and spirit are not completely spiritual because they exist within space and time. So that is why ancestors among the Akan people are fed. When we eat, we give them food to eat as well. They are called to guide the living, and libations are performed in their honor, and so on. Now, the ontological analysis of the Akan conception of existence regards a person as a complex entity connecting several interdependent components. So a living person is a complex interconnected entity with the okra, the soul, the sunsum, the spirit, the nipedua, the body, the muja, the maternal lineage, and then the intro, which is the paternal lineage. And these components are tied to one's lineage, which is rooted in in an object of nature we call totems, which depict one's origin, familial ties, and connections to one biosphere. So the Akans have 8 clans. The entire Akan linguistic group can be divided into 8 clans. These are the clans. We have the Eduana, which is represented by something of nature, like dog or frog. We have the Aguna, which is represented by the parrot. Asachiri, which is represented by vulture and eagle. Then Aseni, bat. Asuna, crow or wild boar. Bretu, leopard. Ekwena, and then buffalo. And then Oyoku, falcon or hawk. So, this makes the Akan ontology and epistemology holistic because it encapsulates everything in existence through interconnectedness and interdependence. Hence, this maxim that has been emphasized already, a person to be is to live with and for others. So your person is defined by living with others, and your personhood is defined by living for others. So I'm drawing our attention to these indigenous epistemologies and ontologies because of the prospect or the significant insight we can draw to guide the AI debate. So this is just a little bit of story about Akan people's epistemology and ontology. So let me talk about decolonizing AI and shaping sustainable futures. The word decoloniality actually is an antithesis, what? Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm here. The word decoloniality is actually an antithesis of the term coloniality. But I think we've talked about this, so let me just go ahead to talk about what decoloniality means. So the word decoloniality has now become very contestable these days. So it is important for me, for example, to take some time to do a brief clarification. So decoloniality is a term invented by our Southern American brothers, originating from the works of Hannibal Cuyeno. I think Davison talked about that. Enrique Dussel and Walter Mignolo, to challenge the ongoing influence of colonialism after colonialism has ended. But before then in Africa, we were conversant with the term decolonization, which was used by Ngugi wa Thiong'o in his work Decolonizing the Mind, the Politics of Language in African Literature, and one of our Ghanaian scholars, Kwesi Wiredu, in his work Conceptual Decolonization as an Imperative in Contemporary African Philosophies and Personal Reflections. But since 2015, the term decoloniality has become very popular in post-independent African discourses, with the volume of publication increasing in proportion, somehow quadrupling the number of publications we had in the last 20 years preceding 2015. In 2015, there was an event in the whole world about Rhodes Must Fall event in South Africa and some part of the world, and that was actually a point of explosion for discourses on decoloniality. So, one of the prominent African scholars of decoloniality now is Indilo Vugasheni Sabelo, who serves as the director of the epistemologies of the Global South at the University of Bayreuth, Germany, here. In spite of the popularity of this word, or this term, in the current liberation discourses in academia, its exact meaning and aim have been very debatable. Today, we have some African scholars in the diaspora even writing against the term decolonization. And recently, in 2002, Olufemi Taiwo, for example, would want us not to entertain the phraseology decolonization or decoloniality. So he wrote a book against decolonization. So the word has now become something like an abominable word. So I understand that the word is now contestable. My readings have shown that decoloniality means several things. It means indigeneity, or it could mean indigeneity. It could mean plurality. It could mean diversity. It could mean inclusion. It could mean decentering. It could mean localization. It could mean delinking. It could even mean strategic delinking, and so on. So I'm not in this presentation inclined to challenge the plausibility of any of these terminologies. So in my research, I have learned that different terminologies of decoloniality have different aims and objectives and may arise from different relevant contexts, which often is due to the nature of coloniality that is being perpetuated in that context. So, in my talk, I'll prefer to use one word to imply several of these terms that come under the word decoloniality, and that word is injustice. For me, injustice could mean lack of plurality, diversity, inclusion, and localization, especially within the AI ethical and sustainability debate. So by decoloniality as injustice, I mean neutrality or lack of difference, exclusion, and delocalization. So, having said this, I will now discuss AI in the context of the decoloniality debate. But as a philosopher who is not quite an expert in AI issues, I promise to offer only a superficial analysis of my understanding of AI. So please don't hesitate to draw my attention if you realize I'm going off track. So I will talk about generative AI. So generative AI is a type of artificial intelligence techniques and algorithm that focus on generating new content or information rather than just analyzing or processing existing data. Generative AI systems can create original content that resembles human-created output, such as images, music, or even entire virtual environment. One of the key techniques used in generative AI is generative modeling, which involves training a machine learning model on a database, on a data set to learn the underlying patterns and structures. So once trained, the model can generate new data that is like the patterns that it has learned. So generative AI is now being used across various domains and is having a profound significance in human life. It is being used to enhance creativity, improve user experiences, facilitate decision-making, and contribute to advancement in fields like education, healthcare, design, and engineering. So generative AI has the potential to unlock new possibilities and drive positive transformation in societies. So despite this, there are still some injustices exist, and these injustices are perpetuated mostly against indigenous communities in the global south or the majority world with regards to the use of AI. And I framed these two injustices in two main ways. I would like to call them digital injustice and AI injustice. Though the first one, which I call digital injustice, is most crucial to the AI debate, the current AI debate focuses on the second, mostly. It focuses on the AI injustice. So for illustration purposes, debate on current AI injustices are focused or have often focused on the recognition of indigenous knowledge systems, issues about cultural appropriation and exploitation, the problem of lack of engagement and consultation of AI development in connection with indigenous societies, the problem of biases and discrimination, the issue of informed consent and data sovereignty, the environment and social impact of AI development on indigenous communities, and so on. However, this form of injustice occurs within the parameters of inclusion. In other words, there are injustices it is an injustice that emerge from AI protocols of usage, and they do not affect those who do not use AI or those who have no digital access. And this challenge is usually expressed, or is best expressed by the proverb. Please forgive me because I work on proverbs. I usually cite proverbs in my talk. So this is best expressed in the proverb, putting the cart before the horse, or a figurative expression we call jumping the gun. I will call it the bicycle slap phenomenon. And then this is the bicycle slap phenomenon. I tell stories as well. A man on the farm saw that he would have a bumper harvest in the coming season, so he promised to buy a bicycle for one of his hard-working sons after the harvest. So he asked his son, "How will you ride a bicycle if I buy it for you?" "I will ride through the bushes, the hills, across the streams and all," the boy retorted with joy. The man looked at him and gave him a heavy slap, sending the boy rolling on the floor a meter away. The wife of the man looked at him angrily and queried, "Do you want to kill my son because of the bicycle you have not even bought yet? For God's sake, leave my son alone." Now, this is the predicament of scholars in the current AI ethical debate. It is like we are jumping or acting too quickly without all the necessary preparations in place before bridging the AI gap or resolving AI ethical issues. Everyone is getting stampeded with AI ethics for the majority world, as though most people in the majority world have internet access or are already using AI. So instead of talking about the AI gap, I prefer that we talk about the digital gap or the digital injustice first. So what then is digital injustice? Digital injustice concerning generative AI is the injustice committed against the unconnected. And by the unconnected, I mean those people who don't have access to the internet. These people are mostly from indigenous communities from the global south or the majority world. So a recent International Telecommunications Union ITU data show that 2.7 billion people are still offline. Mathematically, this is about 1/3 of the world's population. But these statistics are completely worrying if you analyze them from the point of view of least developing countries, LDCs, and landlocked developing countries, LLDCs. That is the global south or the majority world. So in the majority world, only 36% of the population is connected. That is, only 36% of the population is online, and about 2/3 are unconnected. That is 64% of the population are unconnected. Even with this, a good portion of the 36% of the population that is connected in the majority world only have level 1 access to the internet. This means that the connected population has limited access to the internet. That is poor connectivity, resource constraint, low literacy levels, and lack of relevant content. So the injustice being perpetuated here is this, is that these people have been left behind or excluded from the use of the internet. So now, to be excluded from accessing online information also means to be excluded from using generative AI systems, which are mainly accessed online. Now, the second injustice concerns the availability of training data for AI use. Every successful generative AI system, as we all know, depends on the availability of training data. So as datafication expands mainly due to online activities, the process will be exponentially accelerated with the introduction of generative AI systems. For example, generative AI models are trained using huge data sets. ChatGPT-3, for example, has been trained using about 570 gigabytes, that is about 300 billion words of data obtained from the internet, and include books, web text, Wikipedia pages, and other pieces of writing. So after this training, generative AI models are used to generate new content comprising text, images, audios, or videos, or video images which imitate existing data and thereby contribute to the amplification of the datafication process. But let me ask one question, one crucial question. Who uses the generative AI system to generate new data or new content? Certainly, it is not the unconnected because they do not have access to the internet. Then, another crucial question. Where are these contents stored? Again, the answer is on the internet. So they can add to the existing online content, right? So now the problem is that since generative AI models will become larger, through this practice of copying, they will become more data hungry, and data dependency will increase, which has the potential to foster the reuse of previous generative AI generated content. And this process is highly likely to facilitate the release of GPT bot or web crawler, designed to collect text from the internet to improve the language models, including the upcoming GPT-5. The glooming picture is this, that this process will perpetuate the limited picture of reality conveyed by online data that do not always hold for everyone, especially for members of the unconnected communities whose lived experiences, including their epistemologies and ontologies and cultural artifacts and values, have not been registered digitally to be excluded from the synthetic world images and text generated by generative AI systems. So the nature of injustice being committed here is that indigenous communities who are mostly from the majority world are left out of getting their epistemological and ontological representation on generative AI-generated data. Hence, based on this analysis of digital injustice, indigenous communities are not only left behind in terms of access, but they are also left out or excluded from data generation for generative AI systems. Now, the pain in reality, I'm going to tell you another story because the place is too quiet. Now, this story revolves around the question, do goats eat pepper? The picture doesn't look good, but I'm not talking about this particular picture. Do goats eat pepper? This story was told by one of my friends in Cameroon. So in a marking hall, teachers were marking student exams in the hall, and there was a question, do goats eat pepper? And one of the students apparently wrote, yes, goats eat pepper. And the teachers burst out laughing. So the teacher who saw it first started laughing, and the others joined. Everyone started laughing. Until one of the teachers said, yes, it is true. Goats eat pepper. In my village where I come from, goats eat pepper. Then there was dead silence. So after which they tried to talk to each other and settle that possibly the answer might be right. And so that student was marked right eventually. Now, the problem is that these teachers live in the same country, but this knowledge is known to only a minority of them. So now let's suppose that generative AI system is one day trained to mark papers without adequate knowledge of this practice in some part of the majority world. The consequence will be very harmful to these people who are excluded or left out in terms of generated digital data. So because I'm a philosopher, I'm also a little bit curious. I decided before coming to the conference, to this workshop, I decided to ask ChatGPT 3.5 the same question. Do goats eat pepper? It says the following. Goats are known for their diverse and sometimes surprising dietary preferences. While they typically prefer browsing on leaves, grass, and shrubs, they may also consume other items, including pepper plants. However, it is essential to exercise caution because some types of pepper plants, particularly those with spicy or pungent fruits, may cause discomfort or even harm to goats if consumed in large quantities. Additionally, goats may not actively seek out peppers unless they are particularly hungry or curious. If you are considering feeding peppers to goats, it is advisable to consult with a veterinarian or an expert in goat nutrition to ensure it is safe and appropriate for your goat's diet. I didn't stop there. I asked Google Gemini 1.5 Pro Search the same question. And the answer is this. Goats seem to enjoy bell peppers and may even eat the plants. However, they tend to avoid hot peppers. Since goats have diverse preferences, it is recommended to observe your goat's behavior to determine their specific taste. Now, in some part of sub-Saharan Africa, where I come from, goats are used to eating pepper, whether sweet or hot, without being harmed. Such knowledge is known only by those who are situated in this context, but may be offline or may even be online and may have low literacy levels that prevent them from producing content that can later be used in the development of generative AI systems. So what does this imply for indigenous knowledge systems and ontologies such as that of the Akan people of Ghana I discussed at the beginning of this presentation? Why do indigenous knowledge and ontologies matter in AI matters at all? We all know that there are several untapped potentials and lessons about these practices that can be used to address several human challenges that have been neglected by existing AI solutions. So the epistemology of the Akan peoples and Akan ontology, as for example, present very innovative ways of respect for nature by showing the impact of knowledge situatedness and relationality, which are crucial to decoloniality and sometimes biodiversity conservation. Somewhere last year, I read about how AI is being used to conserve and preserve the Amazon forest. It is beautiful to use AI for sustainability purposes. But how do you do this effectively when the people who live around such areas are unconnected? So we are saying that instead of focusing on AI protocols of usage, there should be data justice and fairness in the way people are made visible, represented, and treated as a result of their production of digital data. So Including data from indigenous communities can improve the diversity and generalizability of AI models, leading to sustainable futures. So there should be data justice to ensure that indigenous communities in the majority world are not excluded from digital access and digital data regeneration. By saying that we need data, of course, I am not thinking in terms of quantity. Instead, I am thinking about better data, because large language models are meaningless or sometimes nonsensical to communities that are not represented in the data set, right? So my team and I, we've been working on digitizing account proverbs to make them accessible to AI so that we can host them on internet platforms. And then have a guy who is training, who is generating some of the content from the AI so that later AI can copy some of this content. So we can just go to any AI system, and you key in an account proverb, it gives you an exact cultural representation or nearly exact cultural translation of the proverb. So that's what we've been doing. So before we started the project, I asked ChatGPT 3.5 to give me a whiteboard animation analysis of an account proverb, and this was the response I got. So I wrote, can you give me a whiteboard animation of an account proverb? He says, of course, yes, of course. Here is a script for a whiteboard animation based on the account proverb. I've taken a lot of things out. What interests me is how the AI translated the Akan language. I'm reading it in Akan, specifically the Twi dialect. Obi nim ajarena okotono echrese oho. And he translated it as so. If someone knows how to climb a tree, it does not mean they are the only one who can climb. But the actual translation of what the AI said is this. In Twi, in Akan, it said, the actual thing it said in Twi is that if someone does not know how to bath and the crab, it means it says themselves. This is completely nonsensical. Yeah. So, I think I have little time, so let me just conclude. So, I would say that we are a globalized world. And the ones moving this world in this fourth industrial revolution are the minority world. No doubt about it. And we have heard and listened to how this world is heading towards a precipice with climate change problems, excessive capitalism, poverty, hunger, and war in most parts of the world. In this turmoil, it is suicidal to allow only the minority world or a few people who think they have power and resources to continue to push all of us to God knows where. So there's the need for humanity, the majority and the minority worlds, to bring their knowledge systems on the deck to push the world forward in this era where AI is offering direction to the future. If this push is seen as a form of decoloniality, so be it. I will be glad that in the near future, global sustainability can become one of the synonyms of decoloniality. So thank you very much, Medase. That is my language. Thank you and dankeschön. So I welcome questions?
No, yeah, we're perfect.
I'm so here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. So we still have 15 minutes, which is perfect. So I guess that's 4 to 5 questions. Any volunteers?
Thank you so much. I missed just the beginning, but I think I caught you right where you were getting into the heart of things.
Okay.
I am a storyteller as well, so this was compelling, and I just wish that there were more stories. Each of those proverbs, of course, is a story on its own.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned how there's a digital divide and then there's an AI injustice, so 2 different injustices. And you said we should probably focus more on the digital injustice and less on. So I think both have to be tackled interdependently in a way, because we have, on the one hand, people, indigenous populations that don't have access to the internet. Therefore, they're not even there. They're not even interacting with these systems. But at the same time, those systems have gone on and represented them anyway, right? So I think it is important to think about how when we do solve that digital divide and have left behind the AI problem, we will still have another problem of what is it that the indigenous populations will be interacting with. So I wanted you to kind of reflect a little bit on that, how that the idea of ethics, which you kind of pushed back a little bit on there at the beginning, I think it's actually really the most crucial problem we have right now, is the values that are embedded in these AI systems that are representing cultures that don't even have access to the digital, to the internet, for example.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please, can you give me the last slides, please? Michaels, the last slides. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think I can help myself. Yeah, So you see these are the Sustainable Development Goals. You see 9. That is 9. No, 9. That is industry, innovation and infrastructure, and then 10. Equity, right? I can't even producing equality. Now, I understand what you said, because we are having indigenous knowledges misrepresented on AI systems. But this is being perpetuated because those who correct that don't have access to the internet. So we will compound the problem if you allow that to keep running, because the AI regenerates data. It uses the same data that it has. It learns from them and copies them, right? So if it keeps copying this, whilst those who correct that are not on the internet, then we are going to have a bigger problem to resolve after a while. So I prefer that we talk about bridging the digital gap in the first place, to put those who can correct this misrepresentation online, to build the infrastructure for them so that they can have access, and then make sure that they challenge these narratives on AI systems. I think for me that is the first point of call to addressing this injustice. Maybe I might not be able to convince you, but that's fine.
No, you convinced me. I agree, absolutely. What I meant was that regardless of that, the AI systems are already running.
Yes.
No matter what. So I am more concerned that the rate at which AI systems are generating new knowledge based on whatever knowledge is being generated or the prompts that are being given, the digital filling that gap of the digital divide, the speed at which we're doing that is not at the same rate as the building of this AI system. So how do we compete? I'm with you on the
it's because we have prioritized the AI gap more than the digital gap, and that has been the focus of my presentation. That we have to move the prioritizing the AI gap to prioritizing the digital gap. And
how do we do that? Who do we speak to? Where do we go?
Okay, for me, I usually like to start everything on my own in the first place. So that is what I'm doing. I'm doing a research now. I told you about my project that I'm now working on. The first point is to gather 500 proverbs on the internet using animation videos or whiteboard animation video to translate them. And then we do it in a way that the AI can copy from these so that we're able to do other proverb translations for the account proverbs. If it works, we might replicate this model for other languages. Well, that is what I'm doing now because I don't have any government funding. This has nothing to do with my governments in Ghana. So, yeah, so that's my own way. And I think if everyone starts this way, we'll be able to make an impact.
All right, maybe time for a next question.
Yeah.
And then we will go there.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
I have a couple of questions. The first one has to do with the goats. So I just want to know, I know that there's coconut crabs in Samoa, and if you eat the coconut crabs that eat the coconuts, they taste like coconuts. So do your goats taste like peppers?
You talked so far, I didn't hear you. Again? Please, go back again so that I can...
I'm just asking if, because the goats are eating pepper, do they taste like pepper?
Okay, you mean the goats?
Yeah.
You mean because they are when you cook them?
Yeah.
When you eat them. Actually, I'm a vegetarian.
Oh.
So I don't eat this.
Okay, sorry, we'll leave that food sovereignty talk for another kind of context. I guess the other question that I have to ask you it relates to proverbs, because in our culture we have a lot of proverbs as well, and they kind of like underlie this idea that in our language there's a lot of abstract thought and there's a lot of kind of stories that you have to know in order to understand what we're saying when we talk.
Yeah.
So when we talk, we're not really talking about what we're talking about, right? And so it's kind of this roundabout way of talking. And so I guess my question is do you think that you could program an AI to understand abstract thought and the ways that Indigenous minds think?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, proverbs themselves are abstract thoughts, but then they have a source domain, which is the objects that feature in that proverb, or the circumstance that that proverb actually imitates. Now, what we are doing now is to, first of all, we are conducting a research about proverb comprehension among people from a wide range of age bracket. So we are looking at how children from 6 to 12 years will translate proverbs, and how children, or somehow those who are almost becoming adults, from 12 to 21 will interpret Akan proverb, and 21 and above. This will give us a sense of various models of proverb translation according to age, and then we're able to determine how to translate this proverb in the digital data to make sure that at least everyone, no matter their age, is able to relate to that. So we are not just providing just one core translation of the proverb, because proverbs are actually used in context. So what we are doing is that we will imagine several contexts and then create the translation that way, so that each and every one is able to relate to those translations according to their level of comprehension. Yeah.
Yeah, but the question was, do you think AI can learn how to think abstractly, like in your language? Do you think you can program an AI to think like that?
We can't have it do perfect. We can't have it does a perfect work, but we can have a near translation that will be nearly accurate than what we have now. Example, look at what I just showed you. The language is completely nonsensical. But then we can program it in a way that would at least be closer to what we think is correct.
All right. So we still have a little bit of time. I saw 3 hands. We will do it chronologically, and then we will round this hour up. So you can go first.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for an excellent presentation. So my question is, first I have one comment on AI justice and the digital justice both. And I'm not sure if you have read the work of, come across the work of Hartmut Rosa, who is a philosopher and a sociologist from Germany. So
Please, what's the name?
Hartmut Rosa.
No.
So he talks about social acceleration, and which is actually aided by the technology acceleration and social change. So it's both temporal and the spatial. So I think the problem with what we are seeing here between the divide, the digital divide, and the AI being accelerated is actually aided by social acceleration. That's what most of the commentary, from him or some of the sociologists talk about. And I think, and he has a solution for that. He says the resonance as a concept is a solution for that. So where resonance is basically the relationality, what you're talking about, but it's at a massive, world scale. So the larger scale and the human to human connect. And the resonance is everybody is coming together as a stakeholders, because he has also a paper on business ethics and the acceleration, right? So there is a conflict between acceleration within the business construct, the corporate construct, but at the same time, there is also ethics, which is pressured by the ethical dimension the corporates to adhere to, right? So then the stakeholder mechanism, engagement mechanism came into the picture. So how this is my just a comment. So
Okay.
how this can be bridged at a philosophical level.
Okay.
But coming to my question,
Oh.
so don't you think the digital divide is also a kind of right to be left alone, like left from the whole digital.
The right to be left out?
Yeah, left out from the digital.
A kind of self-incriminating right to be left out.
Yeah,
Be
not
left
just community.
alone. So not to be left
Not
out,
to
but
be-
to be left alone.
I think that will do. To be left, the
Yeah,
right to be
not
left
even
alone.
forgotten, but it's like right to be analog, not to be digital, right?
Yes.
So you don't want to be digital, and what about that? If somebody doesn't want to be digital, and all the services should be provided. What is in the digital realm, it should be also in the physical realm, so that this digital divide is not a bigger problem when you have exactly replicating both the worlds. So for right to
Yes, I can answer.
Yeah.
I think you are done with your question. This is just like saying that there is vaccine and you are not going to take it.
Sorry?
It's like there's a vaccine to cure you of an illness, and you say you are not going to take it. You can't ask yourself to be left alone. I think you see there are. Let me say that these days, if you want to be left alone, but let me just emphasize that we are not talking about individuals here. We are talking about collective. I think it is not now. I should say it's not possible. It's not possible at all to have a community that says I want to be left out of this technological advancement. I don't want to be on the internet. I don't want to be on AI. I don't think any society now will agree to do that in this fourth industrial revolution, because it is not possible.
Yeah, there is a community in India, in Andaman, right? Andaman Sea, there's Andaman Islands. So there is a community which doesn't want to be, part of any of the.
I've been seeing this community. I've been seeing their videos on TikTok every day. I see them every day on.
I'm talking about sentinels who are completely out of the whole. What we talk about civilization, right? They have their own civilization.
What I'm saying is that I have seen their videos on the internet. I read about Indian culture a lot of times, and they are all over TikTok. They are there. So these days, even if you hide yourself, you get yourself out there on the internet, no matter what you do. You might not want it, but you'll be there. I've seen people now do pranks, like what they call pranks. They go about pranking people. Sometimes they do it and you're not aware that you're going to be on social media the next day. Right?
Maybe we can continue this.
We can continue
break.
this, yeah.
We can go to the second last question.
As you're trying to close the digital and AI gap, at what point, you're collecting data from the local indigenous communities and then feeding it to the AI systems, at what point do you want to create a boundaries with certain legal instruments such as intellectual property rights, copyright laws, to ensure that the local knowledge is protected, and also that the communities that provide this knowledge also benefit from this revolution?
Yeah, so we have a couple of partnerships with a lot of cultural institutions among the Akan people where they are situated. So that has already been done. We're not doing it outside their context at all. Actually, most of the people who are providing the information, most of them are from the royal families. And before we talk to them, what happened was that they have a tradition we follow. Some of them who are young, when we talk to them and they are capable of helping us, they have to take us to see their family members, their elderly people. We greet them, we talk, we negotiate with them. Then they allow these young people to work with us. So already we are doing a lot of collaborations and talks with these communities. So as for that, I don't think we're going to have issues with copyright. And then the finished product, actually, when we are done, these data, we are thinking of constructing a place where we're going to call Proverbium or Proverb Museum in the communities where all the members of the community can access these knowledge systems. Right. So
the last question, we still have 3 minutes, so that's perfect.
Okay, so I'll go fast. Thank you so much for your talk and for the stories. So my question is I'm trying to tie something in that you had said with something that Samuel said this morning.
Yeah.
So you were talking about certain kinds of indigenous knowledge systems shaped by experiences and are transmitted orally through storytelling, myths, legends. And to me, this sounds very much the communitarian relationality approach, right? It's the community who comes together to share a story. And this morning, Samuel was talking about certain threats to Afro-communitarianism, that AI systems are promoting non-African values. And so you think of this isolated, he talked about the people, the independent people on their phones. So is there a tension? While at the same time, I understand the want to preserve the proverbs and to teach younger generations, but do you see a tension here between the very essence of translating the stories through the myths and the whatnot, and then we're going to put it in this technology that is so different from this community approach? Do you know what I'm saying?
I get it. I've thought about it. It's like, but this question usually come up when you do a very strict dichotomy between tradition and modernity, which I think shouldn't be. Because when you think about tradition and modernity, then you think that, well, these proverbs are tradition. Now we are saying that we want to preserve tradition, and yet we want to preserve it with modernity. So it's kind of conflicting, right? But then I don't actually like dichotomies. I don't like dividing things. I don't want to say this and that because immediately it creates conflict, right? So I am thinking that tradition and modernity, for example, are the same. And I don't know, but I don't know what to say. I don't think we should even go there about trying to dichotomize them. That for me would create a lot of roadblocks and for communities who are trying to embrace technology. Because one of the reasons people do this is because they think that technology is Western. But technology is not Western. It's not Western. It's just that now the center is from the West. Technology is a form of science, and science is a collective contributions of several civilizations, right? So it's a plate we are all eating from. So we can all contribute and eat from it. Yeah.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm done. The questions are done.
So
Thank
we
you.
have a little bit more than a 10-minute break, and then we will meet up again for the next speaker. Enjoy your coffee, tea, or whatever.
That was great.
Thank you.